Next instructional video of this racing lawnmower quick start guide. What we're going to discuss here is the throttle linkage, throttle cable, more specifically the hand throttle system that we build. So before I do that though, I want to talk about the air filter system here that I'm finding on these machines. This is a Briggs & Stratton. I've had some Tecumsehs as well. I have not been into the Kohlers to see, but what I have found is all of them have this squared notch out plate hole right here on the fan shroud, and it all leads right into the air filter. So I think that what that's doing is you've got forced air. It's helping with the airflow, and you're also getting, you've got some air channeling here, which is going to help you get kind of a circular motion going. So one of the issues you'll find with carburation sometimes on small engines and whatnot is you'll get stagnant air in there, or it'll pulsate, it doesn't know which way to go based off of the compressions of the engine, the valves opening and closing. So, and that can create problems, bogging, stuff like that, hesitation. So I found that really, I've done the other, I've done the intake tubes, and I've done the oil-based filters, and a little bit more fabbing. Yeah, they look cool, but when it comes down to it, I don't know if they're really any more efficient. So you start getting into plenum lengths and stuff like that, and then you also have to have your breather tube off of your valve cover. So my recommendation, and I've done this, I've gone back to these, is just use the stock air filter system. So they're cheap, they're readily available, all the parts stores have them. They come with this outer filter. You can take that off, blow it out with an air compressor in between races, and you can get a lot more life out of your air filter. So that's my recommendation. Just something that'll save you some headache, and it's also, you know, a money savings. You're not buying more parts and more time fabbing. So anyway, well, let's talk about hand throttles, throttle linkage. Let me get this off. There's a couple different train of thoughts. I like the hand throttle up on the steering wheel. I've been out on the internet, did some researching as I was building my first one. There are people out there that run foot throttles, and I have never ran a machine that has a foot throttle. The machines I build, I do this double pedal setup, so you've got the clutch on the left and the brake on the right, and I'm sure it'd probably be okay. The only place I could see putting another pedal in there would be underneath this one on this side. So, but I do know that when you're running these machines around the tracks are small, the corners are tight, and a lot of times you're using your feet, locking them into the machine, locking them into the foot pads to keep yourself on the machine. And so I think you would be at a competitive disadvantage if you had one foot that was tied to a foot throttle, or a foot throttle. You know, it might be easier to keep the governed speed or the speed of the motor where you wanted it, but I do think that it would be kind of a fight to keep yourself locked to the machine. It'd be easier to have both legs, both feet helping you do that. So, and to do that, we do this hand throttle system. So, and all this is a pedal bike, brake lever. I picked this up at the bike shop. You can buy two of them for 15 bucks, so $7.50 a piece. I really like these. The reason I like them is, one, they're aluminum. The other thing that I like about them is they'll have a coil spring in here, so they will have their own assist return. So if I don't have any cable, no spring pulling on the other end, and I hit this lever, it will return itself back. And I've found that helps a lot with the way the cable behaves. Anything to help it return is really good. The other thing that I do with these machines is I pick up this brake line conduit from the bike shop as well. That's what you're seeing right there. It's about $1 a foot. But the one thing about it is it has, and let me get a picture here. You can see that, let me put that right there. See that green inner? There you go, that inner liner. That's a Teflon liner. So, and I've found that the cables will just fly through it. They're just really smooth. So, the other thing I've found is I'll buy the brake cable that comes with this as well from the bike shop. It's already got the end that'll drop into the brake lever. And I've also found they have kind of a Teflon coating. You can't see it here, but it is kind of wrapped, so it keeps it from fraying. And I've just found that they're really smooth. So all said and done, between the $750 for the lever, I've got 3 feet of the conduit roughly. Probably $20 is what it's cost me so far to put this together. So this down here is the stock lever. It's the same type of thing, this conduit with the cable going through it. Now you can race with that. That's the stock lever. We have people that have done that, still trying to get their machines finished, and that's kind of the last thing that they'll do. But if you watch them, it's kind of a fight. You have to let go of the steering wheel to adjust the throttle and adjust your speed. So I think it's kind of a safety issue, but you can do it. I do know it gives you kind of a mechanical disadvantage or competitive disadvantage, because you have to let go of the steering wheel. You can't let off the throttle in a corner because you're fighting the turn, and you have to, it just changes the way you race. So for the $20 to put a hand throttle on, I'd highly recommend it. So anyway, so what I've done here is, all I've done is brought this around, drilled a hole through here. Now these are direct steering machines, so they're a quarter turn. And so you just give yourself a little extra, a little excess, and you're not turning all the way around. It'll be fine. And I've drilled a hole, I've ran it down, no sharp turn bends, and then I've brought it through, and I've just tied it back in to where the stock cable was, just using that same clamp. And then the other thing I've done is I've gone down to the parts store and I've picked up these little throttle connectors. And all this is, let me give you a close-up of it, is just a hole drilled through it, it's threaded, and then you have a set screw. And so I've got my cable going through one end, and then I took an old throttle lever or choke lever off of another machine, and I bent me this little J-hook like that. And that's all that is. That slips back into right down here. So, and I mentioned before, you know, when you build these custom little parts like that, build a couple of them, throw them in your parts box, take it to the races with you. So, and that's what that extra one is for. So what I've done is I've got the cable coming through, and it goes into this butt connector, let's call it. And then I've got this other little J-hook that goes in like that. And then I've tightened that down. It gives me a little bit of adjustment, but I've done this a couple times and it works quite well. And I'm just going to run the throttle up here and show you. And that's all that does, just like that. So now if you see that shiny spring right there, that shiny spring, I found that this was binding up on me a little bit because I'm using spring tension to pull the throttle back to idle, where with this cable you can force it because you've got pressure pushing it back. And so I found that it was binding a little bit, and so all I've done is added a little helper spring. I drilled a hole on the arm on the back side back here, and then I drilled a hole right down here on the bottom and just added a little helper just to get it past that one spot where it was binding. So, and it works very well. I've already ran this machine, it's running good. So the other thing I want to show you is, you know, we follow US LMRA rules, And most of the racing associations that I've ever been around, even cars, off-road, they like an extra or a fell-over return spring. And so the carburetors will have a coil spring underneath this butterfly valve, your throttle plate, and that's the first one, that's primary. And then what I've done is I've just drilled a hole in that linkage up there, just a small drill bit, and then I drilled a hole right here in this support and put a pop rivet with this plate, and then that's my second. So now I've met the rules by having 2 return springs, so that if one gives out, the other one will take over and the machine won't over rev, run out of control, and that's what that's for. So anyway, now there's something that I've done here that I want to show you. On some of my other machines, when I was first building these, what I would do is I would take this cable and I would run it directly to this linkage. And I found that it's really hard to get that engine running at the right governed speed. Now this is an IMO machine, it does have the governor in it, and so I want to make sure that the governor is operating and behaving the way it should. So, and I'm not going to get into removing the governor. I mean, you can do it, you can get these little engines just spinning huge RPMs, but that comes at a cost. You start breaking things and you start running into safety issues. You know, these are cast iron flywheels. They'll only handle, I think cast iron will handle up to maybe like 5,000 RPMs, or it starts shattering. If there's any hairline cracks in it from someone pulling the flywheel off wrong, it will come apart at you at the higher RPMs. So I'm not going to get into doing all that. I don't want the cost of the aluminum flywheel and all that, so I'm just going to keep it governed. And the other thing about that is you know, the engineers at the factory, they'll set this machine up. Granted, it's geared around work, moving the blades and stuff like that, but you know, your governed range is your power band. You know, they'll set this up so that it's safe, but they'll be running it at an optimized RPM to produce the most horsepower, and be the most efficient. And so I can't really see for this class a need to try to outperform that. Just leave it in the governed range and run it. So what I've done, and I'm going to pop this off so this will get shaky for a minute, because I do want to show you what I did on the back side. What I did originally was I hooked this throttle cable up just like so, and I was using the stock spring that connects this lever on the back side, the throttle linkage, to the governor, which is this one right here. And when I was running it and giving it full throttle, the spring was way too weak. It just wouldn't really bring the RPMs up. I think they came up maybe 400 RPMs, just not at all. I think if I would have thrown it in gear and tried to drive it, it would have just killed it. It was just bad. And so what I've done is I've actually replaced that with a stiffer spring. So, and my hopes at the time was that it would behave like a direct linkage, almost as if I had ran the cable right up here. But then there would be a point where it would still give me the governor reaction, and the governor could behave the way it needs to. I've found that a lot of times when you hook them right up here direct, you know, there are times where you've got that thing wide open and you're actually just fighting the governor. It's wanting to do one thing and you're trying to tell it to do another, and it just doesn't work. And when that happens, you'll find yourself tearing stuff up on the inside. But what I did was I just used this stiffer spring, and I've worked it, I've ran it, and what I found it's doing is from idle all the way up to high RPM, it's just responsive. It's behaving like it's direct linked. But then I was also watching where I was trying to over rev it, and there was a point where I was giving it full throttle, and yet the governor was actually working this. And so I was getting the governor to respond so that I wouldn't over rev it, scatter the inside of the motor. So far, I haven't driven it down the road yet. This is just sitting in my shop. But I think this is going to be the solution right here. I might have to go with a little bit stiffer spring or a little bit lighter spring. I'll run it and see how it behaves, but I mean that spring's probably $1, something like that. So, but anyway, so far it's a solution, and I think it's going to work well. And I think that's about all I've got. Oh, now that I'm here, you can see my other little return spring, my helper. And that's all that is I just drilled a hole. And so as this lever comes up, it just helps pull it back down. So anyway, so that's what I've done. I'd highly recommend, if you move to the IMO class or higher, definitely do the hand throttle. My logic and thinking would tell me to stay away from a foot throttle, but if that's where you're comfortable, then give it a shot. It is loud. But I would definitely recommend getting rid of the stock throttle. So the other thing that I've tested with this is the way this one works is you pull the throttle all the way up, and then you hit your stop, and then you can go a little farther, and there's a linkage that comes up and runs the choke. With the way this is set up right now with this spring, I can do that. This choke will still close, so using the stock choke mechanism. So I'm going to leave that and run that and see how it behaves. If I find that I'm actually running into the choke when I'm racing because I'm just trying to get more and more out of it and I'm choking myself out, then what I'll probably do is I'll disconnect that linkage and I'll just find me, pick me up one of those $7 mechanical chokes and just hook it out here. So, but for right now, I'm going to try to use everything I can that's factory and stock, and I'm going to try this little stiffer spring and see how it works. So anyway, I think that's about all I've got for this lesson, and we'll talk to you later.